Welcome to another week of Half Serious. Before we talk about the topic, I just want to take a second and say thank you. Thank you for sharing and respecting the stories that people have come on here and told, which is what this is about. It's about sharing and knowing that these people that come on, that they're not the only ones out there, that there's others that have experienced different things, and that some people that have stepped in shit have learned how to get out of it, or at least step into a whole other completely new pile of shit and are continually learning how to move forward through it. So thank you. You guys are much appreciated. And if you could, just participate how you can, as I'd like to keep this thing going. All right, now on to the topic at hand. We're talking gambling addiction today. Paul Nash is our guest, and he was addicted to gambling. I have dealt with people that are addicted to crack, cocaine, heroin, alcohol, all that other good stuff. But I've never actually met a gambling addict, I think. But that's also because it's a very well hidden addiction, right? Someone can be addicted to gambling and you might not know for a very long time, which is something that he goes into. He also talks about how he was able to overcome it and what he is doing to change how we're detecting people with this type of addiction. And by the end of it, he's going to let us know what we can do to look for signs in our loved ones or friends or what have you. So maybe we can ask the right questions to get them the help that they need. But as usual, I will shut up and let Paul tell his story.
I gambled for just over 10 years and I've just been just over 3 years clean now since my last bet. It wasn't just the gambling. I became a massive problem with my weight as well. So I was incredibly overweight and I lost 55 kilos in 2 years. I changed my relationship with food, with the gym, and I changed my relationship with my life.
What was the anchoring point in gambling where it kind of hooked you in and then you realized, I'm guessing at some point, that it was an issue? So what was that first little bit that anchored you in?
It was sport. So at university, I went from doing nothing for myself before going to university to having to do everything. And it was quite an overwhelming experience. I have mild autism and I also have ADHD as well. So I think the whole experience was quite overwhelming that first week of university. And I needed to do something to take my mind off it. And then I went into a bookmaker's with one of my best friends from university. I won my first bet and must have been about £450 that I won. And it was a small £5 accumulator. To begin with, I was just betting on the more popular international teams. So when I say international teams, I'm talking about the big football leagues. So the Italian Football League, the Spanish Football League, the English Premier League and divisions below that, and the French League. And that's how it began, really. Sport is probably my biggest hobby. So associating sport and gambling for me at the time was a win-win because I'd won my first bet. So in my head, I was like, what have I got to lose from gambling? The different types of gambling, casino, slot machines, things like that, they didn't really interest me because it wasn't sport. And it turned from betting on sport live. Towards the end of my addiction, I started betting on sport that was virtual sport. So virtual darts, virtual football, virtual horse racing. And it was because I was able to win or lose money. Most of the time it was losing money quickly by doing that virtual sport. And I'd gone from gambling, I'd gone from not gambling at all towards the end of my addiction to gambling everything that I had. And the biggest bet that I put down was just over about £2,000. And that would have probably cleared the majority of my debt that I was in at the time. But when you're going through a gambling addiction, you're not thinking logically. So you're not thinking, let's logically do what you need to do with the money. I didn't. When you're going for a gambling addiction, you have the fix of, I want more money. I want more of this. I want more of that, even though it was destroying. It destroyed me. It was destroying me. It was destroying my life at the time.
So after you started gambling in sport at the very beginning, did your friends notice a change in you, or did you notice it first?
So once I graduated university, I came back and friends started to realize that I didn't have much money available to me. Even though I was working full time, I was working as a teaching assistant. I worked for 6 months in that position before I got sacked. And the reason I got sacked was because essentially it was down to my punctuality. And the reason I wasn't getting to work on time was because I was gambling late at night. So then it was affecting my sleep. This is what happens when you're going through a gambling addiction. Like most addictions, you're missing out things that you need. So you're missing out sleeping, you're missing out eating properly, things like that. And friends would say that they would often, if we'd go out and I said I don't have the money to pay for this, they'd often pay for it. And then after that, it would be the question of, why haven't you got money? You're literally living at home without having to pay
Mhm.
any rent or anything like that. And I would say I had something like an unexpected bill. But to be honest with you, I think as much friends and family that may have noticed it, the one key person that can overcome an addiction is the person that has it. And you can put that person under as much pressure as you like. Unless they're ready to overcome it, there's no point in them going into recovery, because if they start in recovery and they're not ready to, the
Mhm.
chances are they're going to relapse. And even if they do relapse, it's not a criticism of them. It just means that they're not ready, they're not in the right space to overcome a gambling addiction. It could mean that, or it could mean that they haven't been through the right recovery. In England, we have different methods of recovery. So you have the standard therapy that you can go to, cognitive behavioral therapy, but we also have other organizations that offer retreats and stays that you can go and visit. Some of them you pay for. If you go through the National Gambling Helpline, which is a company called GamCare in England, the majority of
Oh.
the support that they offer is free to the consumer. And it's one of the only industries that offers free support to people. If you have an alcohol addiction, a smoking addiction, a drug addiction, sometimes you have to pay for them if you want recovery. But gambling, you don't have to pay for as a whole. When you go into recovery, you get if you go through therapy, you get standard successions. And my employee assistance program, I contacted them on the day that I overcame my addiction, and they said to me, "You need too much support. We can't offer you that support." And that's when I contacted GamCare, and GamCare then put me in touch with my local provider, and they offered me six. The standard sessions are 6 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy. And after that, I didn't need any more. That's what my employee assistance program could have offered me. But the problem with them is that they're not trained to give deep interventions. I think they're trained to give general advice. Because
Mhm.
gambling is often overlooked as an addiction, it's starting to become much more present now with the different bits and pieces of work that are being done. Because it's overlooked, no one really knows what to do with a gambling addict, and nobody realizes how the addictions cross over. Thankfully, I was only addicted to gambling. A
Yeah.
lot of people that I know that have gone into recovery were also addicted to alcohol, drugs, things like that.
Is gambling pretty accessible over there?
Yes, it's very accessible. The problem with gambling is it's a hidden addiction. So the other three, smoking, gambling, drugs, you can see side effects from someone when they're
Yeah.
drinking or their behavior. But with gambling, if you wanted to, you could access it every minute of the day. You can access it on Christmas Day if and that's what I was doing. At the height of my addiction, I was gambling on the Saudi Arabian Football League, and I had no interest in that football league. It was just my fix was, how can I get money quickly? And that was the way to do it.
Were you realizing there was a problem when you were losing, and then when you're winning, you were thinking, "Hey, no, this is good." So was it a kind of a pendulum swing every time, or how would that work with the losses and the wins?
When I started to get myself into debt, I think I started realizing it was a problem. The problem with that was I didn't see a way out of it, and I didn't see any other option. I was enjoying it when I was winning, but when I was losing, I was thinking I wasn't taking a step back. I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing to myself financially, but not just financially, physically and mentally as well. I was enjoying the wins, and when the losses came, it was devastating. But rather than seeking help, my first thought was, when am I going to put my next bet down? How much is that next bet going to be? I wasn't taking a step back. I wasn't being logical about it. I was just thinking, win money quickly. That's what I needed to do. And in England, a lot of the gambling advertising is, they say in most of the adverts, don't chase your losses, but that's exactly what people do when they're going through an addiction. It's like telling an alcoholic not to drink. That's not going to happen, because
Yeah.
they need to be that person that wants to change their life. And it was something so simple that changed my life. One of my friends, we were going to bookmakers, and then he put it in our group chat. He said, I thought you'd stop gambling, because I told them I'd stop gambling, and I lied and manipulated my friends and family all the time. Borrowed money from them, said I had bills to pay, things like that. I didn't
Yeah.
have any bills to pay because I was living at home rent free with very little expenditure. And that was what I had available was disposable income. The day I overcame it was that one person saying, I thought you'd stop gambling. And then my best friend called me and said, what's this I hear about you and gambling? And I said, I'm just out at the moment. I am gambling. I'll go home and I'll give you a call when I'm at home. And I had about an hour to think about what I wanted to do. And I either needed to change my life completely and stop gambling, or that day I contemplated taking my own life because of the guilt and the shame that I felt around my addiction and the way that I'd made other people feel. But that's when I said I contacted my employee assistance program. They sadly said they couldn't support me, but I'm pleased they said that, because for me, it was just another obstacle to overcome. I'm used to overcoming obstacles, and if I wasn't as determined as I am, because I'd been told I can't do something before, every time I
Hmm.
get told I can't do something, that inspires me. That inspires me to say, I can do this. And if then I contacted GamCare, and GamCare put me in touch with my local provider, then I called my best friend and I went round to his house, and his partner sat me down, and she's also a best friend of mine. So that they've got together, and they're two best friends of mine. And his partner sat me down, and we sort of had probably the first properly honest conversation about just how shit everything was, and just how difficult I'd made things for myself. Not one of them realized how bad my addiction was, because it comes back to that hidden addiction. You don't see, so you see small side effects. You see small side effects from a gambling addiction. You don't see, if that person is clever, they're not gonna do it when they're out as much, because again, I was manipulating my behavior when I was out, because I didn't want people to go, why are you gambling as much as you are? Because
Hmm.
I then get asked questions, and then people put me under pressure, and then I'm made to feel even worse about the current situation that I'm in. But yeah, it's a difficult addiction, gambling, and it's only getting worse for people. I'm probably one of the younger people in recovery in the UK that speak open publicly. I've worked with so many organisations in the UK, and addictions last a lot longer than 10 years a lot of the time.
Mm.
Addictions last 20 years. And it involves, my understanding is, a lot of the people that have an addiction are that desperate, they turn to criminality. The NHS, who are the people that look after the health of people in the UK, are now taking it over. And I think that's a good step, because it means that it's going to be treated as a public health issue, with it
Hmm.
being the major provider who support people with their physical health. And when you go to the doctors and hospital, you get asked how much you drinking, how much you smoking. There's not one question about how much financial difficulty you're in. If you start asking people about financial difficulty, that is when you might lead to that conversation about gambling and what are you spending. There isn't conversations like what do you spend most of your time doing. The most powerful thing about me being in recovery was a conversation I had with a friend of mine that I went to university with. She reached out to me and said, I've got a gambling addiction. She said, I'm only spending this amount of money each week, each month. And I said, I don't care how much you spend each month. You've told me you've got an addiction. Let's get you some support. And she reached out for support. I made her feel validated. That's the problem with any addiction. If you're going through it, you often think you're on your own. You're not on your own. There's so many people that are in the same position as you. The difference is you're taking steps to change your life. They're not ready to take those steps. Or it may be that they're not able to take those steps. But the more we can encourage difficult conversations, not just about addictions, but about mental health as well and about suicide. I contemplate taking my own life, but the more we have them, the easier they're going to become because it's about reducing the stigma that is around the difficult conversations. Women do it very well. Women talk to each other about their mental health. A lot of men don't because they see it as a weakness, and that's what we can learn. So men can learn a lot from women about having that conversation, and it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength to open up about struggling. And if I can help one person, that's all I want to do. It doesn't stop because my recovery is talking about my experience so that the next person doesn't go through what I did because they may not be as determined as I was. And when they get rejected, if they get, they might sadly take their life. And that is the last thing I want anyone to do. There's so much learning to happen from every recovery story. And it's so important that that person does feel that sense of pride when they go into recovery. And even if they relapse, one thing that I always say when I do the talks that I do, relapse is normal in recovery. You don't go back to stage one, you go to stage two. Stage one is you don't want to do anything about your addiction. Stage two is you know you've got the addiction, you just don't have the right support in place. I still think about gambling all the time. The difference is I'm not acting on my thoughts, which is what I was doing before. And that is key. I'm always going to be a gambling addict because I'm always going to have gambling on my mind. The difference is I'm not going to be an active gambling addict because I'm not actively gambling. I'm comfortable with the fact that I will be an addict for the rest of my life. I'm never going to gamble anymore because of how much I've achieved in recovery. Often a friend of mine, he says to me, you inspire me. I'd like to achieve what you have. And I'm quite honest with people. I say to him, I don't want you to achieve what I have because that's not your goal. I want you to achieve what you want to achieve. I always celebrate other people's success. I tend not to celebrate my own success because I find it difficult. I think everyone finds it difficult being kind to themselves and saying, you've done well here, you've done well there. I find it incredibly easy to be kind to other people and to say, you've done really well here. I do some peer support work in the UK, which is essentially a listening service. I'm not a qualified counsellor or anything like that. I'm qualified to level 2, but I'm not a qualified counsellor. And I said it to the person the peer that I'm working with. He's still actively gambling at the moment. The difference is he's not gambling as much as he was. And I said to him, you've been through a very difficult time recently. You should be really proud of yourself with how he's almost halved his gambling, and I'm never going to tell someone not to gamble. That's not my place to tell someone not to gamble. It's their decision, and if they want to gamble, that's entirely up to them.
When you say you'll never gamble again, I can see how, I don't want to say easier, but how it'd be very black and white with, drugs or alcohol. But with gambling, I feel like there's such a gray line. A friend could say, "Hey, I'll bet you $5 you won't, go do something." What's your line with that stuff? Like, how do you differentiate? Or you just completely anything that they say, "Hey, I'll bet you can't do this," you just block it out and just say no?
I've been asked by friends. I've been asked to go to the horse racing with friends. I haven't been, not for any reason, but because we just haven't been. And I think the fact that I've said that I will go to that, I just won't gamble. They often ask questions about that, and they're like, "The point of going to horse racing is to gamble." And my response to that is, that might be the case, but I don't want to put myself in a position that makes me vulnerable like I was before. I was incredibly vulnerable, and all it takes is that one bet to win and me become addicted again. The way that I see it is, if a friend of mine is saying, I don't think you can do this, or I don't think you can do that, and they're saying, let's put some money on it, I know with that how much I'm going to get, or how much I'm going to put that, or how much I'm going to bet them. I haven't done it, but with gambling, it's an open space. So if you put £10 down, you can win up to £50 on, or you can win a hell of a lot more. So I think it's the fact that with gambling, it's so unpredictable and you can win an absurd amount of money. Over the course of my gambling, I was probably in debt of just over £10,000. At the most, it was 3,500, and I managed to clear that within about 4 months. And that was incredibly eye-opening to me, because it said to me, look at how much money you have available to you. I was able to enjoy my first long haul holiday in a hell of a long time, about 2 years ago, going to Thailand. I think that the grey line for me
Mhm.
is, if someone asks me to put a bet down, I would say, no, I'm not putting a bet down. I'm still comfortable going to places like the casino, going to horse racing. I go to football all the time.
So the places themselves aren't triggers, just mostly the action. And is that common? Is that for a lot of gamblers or just individually?
Everyone in recovery has different things that they will do. Like, some people won't talk about their financial circumstances. Some people will. I'm happy to talk about any part of my story, but other people, it might trigger them talking about their financial circumstances. But I think for people in recovery, some people won't even go to the horse racing, or some people won't even go to the casino because that would trigger them. Placing that bet is the trigger for me, placing that first bet, and just not knowing what you're going to get from it, and caveat that by saying to myself, hang on a minute, yes, you would have won money here, but the next bet you put on, you wouldn't be so logical about it,
Hmm.
because when you're going through an addiction, you're not thinking logically.
Do you get a rush from placing the bet or from winning the bet? Is it just the placement and just wondering if you're gonna win or lose?
It was winning. It was, if I'd won, I'd just have a grin on my face, especially if I was just, let's say I was just lying in bed after winning, or I'd just have that rush of, I've just got this reward. What else is there that could make me feel any better? But then if
Mhm.
I'm losing the bet, I'm feeling dejected. My heart rate is racing, and I'm thinking, but my heart rate would also be racing if I won as well. But I'd be feeling disappointed. But then I'd be like, get yourself out of that headspace. Get yourself in the positive headspace of, you can win this money back very easily and very quickly. And it's like the gambling companies, they're using reverse psychology on you by saying, don't chase your losses. Telling an alcoholic not to drink isn't going to happen.
Mhm.
Telling a gambler not to gamble isn't going to happen unless they're in recovery. So in England, we have something called Soccer Saturday and Super Sunday. It's probably the most watched sport event over the weekend. And when you go to the pub and you watch it, I can guarantee there is going to be a gambling advert. And what they're going to do is they're going to offer you a price boost. Something that would normally be 5 to 1, they've said, for all new customers, we're going to put a limit of 50 to 1 on it. So you can win 50 quid rather than five, but you have a limit of placing £1 down. And that is enticing vulnerable people. What's the harm in placing one bet? But that was my thinking. What's the harm in placing that one bet? I became addicted for just over 10 years. My
Mhm.
friends and family have been incredible. Not one of them has stepped to one side and said, we're not supporting you through this. And what support is available to a gambler in the UK is also available to what we call affected others. Affected others are friends and family, or it could just be someone you've had one conversation with that has also been through the addiction, because it's important not to forget the impact it has on people around you. The hardest thing for me in recovery was having that first conversation with all of them. And after I'd had that first conversation, it was such a relief for me, because the hardest thing is to realize you've got a problem, or for me, the hardest thing is to realize that I'm wrong and that I had been doing this. And all of them said something along the lines of, "You have nothing to apologize for. I didn't know you had the addiction was as bad as it was. Get
Hmm.
yourself into recovery and get yourself into a good headspace." And that shows me that I have the right people in my life that have kept me going in recovery. The hardest thing wasn't overcoming my addiction, it was losing the weight that I've lost, because overcoming my addiction was about as simple as disassociating sport and gambling. And that happened with therapy. And that was a lot. Whereas with my weight loss took 2 years to lose that 55 kilos. And it was 2 years of hard graft, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week in the gym, working hard every single morning or evening, depending on when I went, and staying consistent. Whereas my gambling, all I had to do was change my mindset, and that was
Hmm.
so much easier. But it's incredible what you can achieve from going into recovery.
What's something that you think? I know that this, like you're talking about, it has to be that person's decision, but is there anything that somebody could have maybe said to you or done differently in the very beginning that you think would have altered your path or made you look into recovery a little bit sooner?
For me, I don't think so. Not for me, because the problem when you're going through an addiction is you become incredibly selfish and incredibly self-centered. It would be easier for me to lie and manipulate and borrow money than it would be to have that first conversation with people, because when you have that first conversation with people, the hardest thing is acknowledging you have that problem. So I don't think there is anything that anyone could have done to to stop me from becoming addicted for as long as I did. I did a podcast a few months ago, and we were talking about how manipulative different addictions are, and gambling. He said to me, having a gambling addiction, you're arguably very clever. And I sat there and I'm thinking, I'm not clever at all, because but then he said to me, "You are clever because you've done all of these things. You've manipulated, you've lied, and you haven't gambled when you're out in public with people as much as I did when I was at home. So you've thought about all of these things, and then when you're out with people, you're thinking about your next bet. So with my ADHD,
Hmm.
my mind is often going at 100 miles per hour and it doesn't stop. And that just made my mind go even quicker. And when I was thinking of what am I going to do when I get home, it wasn't what am I going to do when I get home. It was, let's look at the fixtures on the football or the cricket or the darts or things like that. And it was, let's make money quickly. And how am I going to make money quickly? I didn't plan the next bet. I planned the first bet I was putting on. And once I'd done that and I'd got the money, I'd then look at what I could win money quickly on. I wasn't being logical about the next few because I needed money quickly. Having an addiction doesn't just affect your behavior, it affects you physically, it affects you mentally, it affects relationships with everyone. And ultimately, it brings that question of trust into things, doesn't it? So it brings that question, since I've been through recovery, I hate how I made other people feel when I was going through the addiction, but I can't change that. I can only change what I do in the future. At the end of the day, something that going into recovery has taught me is that I can't change other people's opinion of me. I can only change my actions and what I do in the future. And biggest credit to those around me is that I'm not going to gamble again, because they have helped me make that decision. They have not stepped to one side throughout what I was going through, and they've been incredibly supportive towards me. And I can't put it into words how grateful I am to each and every one of them that has helped me in recovery and helped me overcome the problem with my weight.
Do you think that you could have changed your relationship with food had you not changed your relationship with gambling?
I got asked a question from a peer that I'm volunteering with recently, and he said, "Were you avoiding anything when you were gambling?" And I said to him, "Yeah, I hadn't looked at it that way, but yeah, I was avoiding losing weight and I was avoiding getting myself out of debt." That's a good question, but I think that day just changed my life completely. Changed my outset, and it really made me think about how I'd made everyone else feel because I'm very much a people pleaser. So I like making other people happy. I've always put them before myself. But for the first 2 years of me being in recovery, I put myself first. I manipulated my exercise regime to meet my new circumstances. And when I go to the gym when I was gambling, I take longer breaks because in between that I was gambling. That was when I was in debt of just over 3,000.
In the next 10 years or whatnot, what do you need to accomplish to meet the next milestone, rather?
I think the next immediate goal for me is getting onto the housing market. And I'm now in a job where I have so much value and I have giving back so much. And I'd like to be in a position within my local authority, which I'm starting to be now, where they are starting to recognize gambling as an addiction. The council, they've asked me to do an awareness session with them. I've only just started there, but because I've had that conversation with them about me and my addiction,
Hmm.
they're now thinking to themselves, let's use this individual how we should be using them to help us and to help us understand how gambling affects people.
When people listen to this and such, they probably are thinking of different people in their life that maybe have a gambling addiction. What should they do to maybe nudge their loved ones or friends or whatnot to go seek some help, or at least suggest it? Because sometimes that can set off a whole other thing in a negative way.
I think that the key is just to let that person come to you and not to blame them for having the addiction, because if you start blaming them, then their mindset of I want to go into recovery could
Hmm.
change to all I'm getting is negative criticism from this person. I'm just going to continue hiding it from them because hiding it from them is going to be easier than having a conversation. Just pay attention to their behavior. And if their behavior changes, then
Hmm.
rather than asking them about their gambling, ask them about why their behavior's changed. So let's say that you're out at the pub with them and they are spending a lot of time on their phone. And then when you look over, you see that they're on one of the betting apps. You could say, "You're spending a lot of time on your phone. Is everything okay?" And then they will either say, "Yes, everything's fine," or "No, I'm gambling." And they may not say it there and then to you, but if you reach out to them, if you send them a text message and say, "Is everything okay? I notice you're on your phone a lot." When they're at home, they might say, "Actually, no, it's not. I'm going through so much at the moment. I'm in so much debt and everything." When you start asking them more about their debt, then they might start saying, "I'm spending all of this money on
Hmm.
so many different things," and as soon as they're ready to, they will come to you.
Hmm. With the debt, is that something that family members should try to help them out with, or is that something that they need to get out themselves, kind of as a learning lesson?
If a family member helps the gambler out of debt, then they're not helping the person because when they're in debt again, they're going to say, "Can I have this money? Can I have some money again to get myself out
Hmm.
of debt?" And money, yes, money's important, but money isn't the most important thing. The most
Hmm.
important thing to me is friends and family and being in recovery and making that person make their own decisions. If they want to get themselves out of debt, or if they want to overcome the addiction, they will overcome the addiction.
Is there a contact or anything that you want me to leave in the show notes?
Yeah, I'm happy for people to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. My Instagram is public, my Facebook is private. So I would so I can send you the link for both of them. My Instagram is Nashi5293, which is NASHI 5293, and my Facebook is Paul AR Nash. You'll find it easier to follow me on Instagram because that's where I post a lot of my content that I do, and I've got some really exciting opportunities coming up that I'm going to be sharing on there. And recovery has been so special, and the what I've achieved from it, I didn't expect to be doing these opportunities like the podcast that you've kindly said I could be a guest on, and
Mm.
all of the work that I've done last year with different organizations. And this year's an exciting year for me with the podcasts that I'm doing.
I have well, two final questions.
Yeah,
One
please.
is, what is something that you wish somebody had asked you that hasn't been asked yet?
I would probably say when I was gambling, if more people had started questioning my behavior when I was
Mhm.
gambling, then maybe I would have taken it more seriously or something. So since I've been in recovery, I think the one question I don't get asked enough is what can these organizations do that they're not currently doing to support people? The problem is in England at the moment, these organizations, these charity organizations, they are doing such incredible work,
Mhm.
but the problem they've got at the moment is they don't have funding available to them. And I don't think I've ever been asked when I've been speaking publicly, what more can we be doing to help support you? What they could be doing differently is making their service more accessible to people. There's so many organizations doing such incredible work with limited funding, but at the moment their priority is keeping themselves afloat, and it's making sure that they can manage the next day. And it's not what can we do to support people from different communities? How can we make support more accessible to people from the ethnic minority, to younger people, and things like that? And there is a lot of universities and colleges when people start university and college. That's where I first started gambling properly at university and college. That's where I became addicted. But
Mhm.
they don't want to address the topic of gambling as an addiction. So every time I've reached out to the university that I studied at and said, can I offer you some support, or can I help you develop a referral criteria working with your local organisation to help the students that are there? I think the reason they don't want to do it is because they don't want me to shine them in a bad light when I share how little I was supported with my gambling addiction whilst being at university. I'm not going to do that because there is nothing that anyone could have done to stop me from becoming addicted to gambling.
As you know, our podcast is about, well, trauma, grit, and gallows humor too. But on the grit side of things, what do you think pushed you? I know you said that your friends and stuff had talked to you,
Yeah.
but how come you had the grit to change your mindset with stopping the gambling and losing the weight? Like, what do you think gave you that as opposed to some of these people that continue on and really just dig themselves a grave, so to speak, metaphorically or actually?
Throughout my life, I've always been sort of the last person picked for a sports team. Every time that I've been told I can't do something, I've shown them that I can. The reason I overcame the addiction was actually with the help of the employee assistance program saying you need too much help, because that comes back to me being told I can't do something. And
Mm.
that was so difficult to hear. And I had two options. I either change my life or I sadly end my life. And I chose to change my life rather than I hope no one ends their life, but sadly it's a reality. It's a brutal reality
Mhm.
that people sadly have to go down that way. That was the hit me moment, I think, when that whole day, it was life changing, life transforming, life changing. Being told I'm not worthy of yours, essentially in a brutal fashion, being told I don't deserve help by a company
Mhm.
really inspired me to say, actually, I do deserve help. I'm going to contact the organization I know I can contact, and they will support me. And they did support me. It's a testament to the behavior on that whole day of everyone that I reached out to my best friend, to my other best friend who I went round, and we set goals. Physical health is important. Mental health is equally as important, but you can't put a value on it. And
Well, I want to say thank you for what you've done, not only, with your own self-development and everything and changing your own life, but using that as a platform to help others change. I love it when I have people on that take their success and then try to help others also succeed. Thank you for that, and thank you for not taking your own life, because now you get to come out here and positively influence others, and hopefully somebody else that's on that cusp will see that and realize that they can do it too.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for helping the conversation around gambling addiction, but also mental health and suicidal ideation as well.
Thank you guys for tuning in this week. And if you like this episode, we do have a lot more episodes posted. Find a topic, I'm sure we've got it. And if we don't, then maybe you have the topic that we need. Feel free to contact us at tess@halfseriousllc.com. Our email, website, all that other good stuff is in the show notes, as well as I put Paul Nash's Instagram and his contact info down in there as well, in case you think that you have an addiction with gambling or know somebody that is, so you can contact him with any questions. All right, guys, I hope you have a beautiful week.